Bernard, when did you first hear about facilities management? What were you doing, and why did it sort of attract you?
Well, it came as a result of having set up my practice in 1970 as a different breakaway from traditional quantity surveying, and I wanted to go more into building economics and development economics. And very quickly after that, I came across Frank Duffy and John Worthington, who were lecturing up at University College, the Bartlett. And as a result of that, Frank and John had set up a different type of architectural practice as well, and we found that we were kind of kindred spirits, both looking outwards from where we had been. And they very quickly got into the interior fitting out market in quite a big way. And they brought me in to help them to do the financial appraisals of the various options that they put to their clients, like, you know, should they be here, should they be there, do they need more space, do they have an extension? And as a result of that, we started to get closer to the people who were managing the buildings, they didn't know it then, but they were actually the facility managers. I'm talking about the early 1970s now, all the way back. And as a result of that, we started to work a lot with Frank, and he set up the magazine Facilities. You remember that, Barry? Yeah, I think you wrote for it, didn't you?
Yeah, I did a fair few articles when I was with you then, yeah.
That's right. And then he said, would you write a regular series on the running costs of buildings, which I knew very little about, but I wrote a little paragraph every month for him, and at the end of the first series, he came back to me and said, look, this has been really popular, which rather surprised me. And he said, well, would you write another series for us? But this time we'd like you to do a 2-page spread. So that was very challenging, because I really couldn't have filled more than a half a page on running costs in those days, although we did have some data. So a colleague, Andrew Hayward, and I sat down every month and did some research and came up with an article about the costs of security and maintenance and cleaning, at the end of which we actually learned enough about it to move forward and to use this data for benchmarking purposes. And it was through that process that we got into contact with facilities managers in quite a big way. I think you were involved with some of those earlier projects with us when we started to go to people like TSB and Allied Dunbar, helping them to do benchmarking. That all came from those early stages. And at the same time, Frank was very much instrumental in the setting up of the BIFM as well. And I was involved in some of the early discussions about the formation of a new institute for them. So, and really by, I suppose, the early 1980s, facility management had kind of become accepted as a title, although there were all sorts of different ways of carrying out the job, as you probably know, and all sorts of different scope and span of activities. And it was just very interesting watching it emerge.
But for me, one of the big breakthroughs was your publication, Premises Audits. So did that come out of the work you were doing for facilities?
It did, yes. The series of articles that we wrote for facilities, the 2-page spreads, they decided they wanted to publish as a book. So they took those articles and we added some material in, and that's where the Premises Audits came. And then I think that was quite successful, but I decided after that I would like to do another version of Premises Audits, which became Facilities Economics, all 840 pages of it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yes, so it started out as an upgrade of Premises Audits, and very quickly turned into basically everything that I knew about. So, and I think again you were involved with that.
I did a lot of the work on that. But again, that Facilities Economics, I mean, I guess to some extent we're jumping a little bit ahead, but from my recollection, whereas Premises Audits was a publication that was sort of known amongst the inner circle, the Facilities Economics took the whole thing out to a much wider audience, including into academia.
That's right.
And I think it became sort of almost like a standard text, didn't it, for students? So that must have been quite an interesting time for you.
Well, it was interesting, and of course, what for me, it had the effect of taking what I originally had specialised in, which was building economics, and adding in the facilities. So eventually, we were now talking about the whole spectrum from inception to completion and round the cycle. And of course, Facilities Economics, we wrote in a lot of stuff which we felt was relevant like development appraisal. We thought facility managers should understand about property valuation and development values. And of course then there were all the soft services, the stationery and the reprographics and things which no one had ever really considered to be part of facilities before, and they were starting to be rolled in, so we felt we had to put all that in. So really we had facilities economics covered everything, literally, from the economics of making a cup of coffee to the development of a central London office building, and all stops in between.
I guess what interested me in terms of BWA and the work you'd done was the fact that, having done a building economics degree, the huge bit that was missing was the reason you actually invested in the asset and built it in the first place, which was to use it.
That's right.
Yeah, so there was nothing, it was a complete void, and that's what interested me, and your pioneering work around premises audits and the other stuff really sort of opened up that whole area. And I think that was what was interesting. It was very, it was a dynamic time, wasn't it, in terms of the industry realising it existed and the work that we were doing there.
That's right. Well, I think the background to that, actually, Barry, was interesting in a way, because when I qualified as a quantity surveyor, there was nothing in the whole of the syllabus, anything to do with running costs or the whole life at all. And when they changed the syllabus, excuse me, and when I started BWA and had no work, actually, just a concept, and I got some time teaching at the South Bank Polytechnic. And I had to teach the new syllabus that came in, which had a lot of information about development appraisal and whole life economics in a simple way. But it was all very, very theoretical. But I actually had to learn it for the first time, because I never passed that lot. So we started to look at those issues, and I used to do a lot of development consultancy in those early days too. But the cost in use side, well, there'd been a book written in the 60s by a chap called Dr. Stone from the BRE called Cost in Use, and it sat on the shelves there gathering dust and was only taken out when people were rushing up for their examinations, and no one was using this. But then when we got in to look at the premises audit side, I started to look at these lifetime costs and all of the discounted cash flow, which is all part of the process, and started to use that in practice, which is all very interesting. But suddenly along comes PFI, and whereas people had no interest whatsoever in the cost of running buildings, because actually it doesn't make much difference in the cash flow, as you know, especially when you've discounted it down the line. But when the PFI came along and people needed to look at whole life costs, then the whole thing literally took on a new life of its own. And that's when I started again to get really interested in how you would start to manage that process during the design stage, which is a lot of work I'm doing now is in that field.